All right, many thanks, Oyeyemi Ajayi, for that background report. Let's now introduce our guests, beginning from the studio. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Nkemakonam Dixon Orji, disarmament and arms control expert and programs coordinator of the former Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons, PRESCOM. A pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, let me also welcome AIG Abutuyaro, retired, fellow of the National War College and former CP, Zamfara State. He joins us via Zoom. Thank you for joining us, AIG.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigeria.
Yeah, good morning. I'm from our Jos studio. We have Major Gabriel Adiofiku, retired MD CEO Damex Consultant Limited Development and Security Consultant, one-time Secretary General, retired Army, Navy and Air Force Officers Association, currently consultant on integrated community development initiatives under the UNSDP programs in several states in Nigeria, Ghana and Sierra Leone. You are welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, NTA. Good morning, Nigeria. It's a privilege being on the program with you today.
Okay, let's start with our guest in Lokoja, AIG Abutuyaro. We just want to, just this morning we were discussing, during the newspaper review, when they said that some arms were even missing.
3,907.
Missing from the armory. How did we get here? What exactly is the situation? I mean, to this point where illicit arms are fueling violence everywhere, insurgency and communal clashes. What exactly is the challenge?
The challenges are many, and the consequences are very obvious. The challenges arose from many factors that predates the moment. And these factors are multifarious, ranging from the remote factors, external factors, and of course, globalization of criminality. And this is further compounded by the fact that our own operational area here is bedeviled by institutional weaknesses, paucity of capacity, and gap in governance. Gap in governance is to say there are many coordinating efforts that ought to be made via an all-government approach kind of management, which includes community, establishments, individuals, and et al. We have these obvious gaps, and this has led in many ways to the kind of contemporary problem of influx of arms. Remind you, we have a lot of borders line that are really unmanned. As I speak, Nigeria has 1,475 illegal borders. Of all these land borders of 1,475 illegal borders, only less than 90 that will have established border control posts. We have only 14 sea posts that are fully manned by the Federation of Nigeria. Considering the fact that we're a littoral state, so to speak, we have extensive border vasting over 1,000 kilometers between Nigeria and Niger. We have a land border that is within the range of 855 kilometers between Nigeria and Cameroon boundary. And we have a land border that is within the range of 711 kilometers, Nigerian Benin Republic boundary. The totality of these gaps has monumental consequence with respect to the uncontrolled and seemingly unchecked arms inflow into our country. Besides that, we are bedeviled with strategic neighbors whose political and security direction falls outside our surveillance and control. And that is the one we talk about during our last session of interaction, that we recommended that we require a deeper reboot of relationship with our strategic neighbors. Our strategic neighbors are Niger, Chad, Cameroon, Benin Republic, and of course, on the littoral boundary, Cameroon and Equatorial Guinea, because within the realms of the Gulf of Guinea, we have extensive unchecked border alignment. So the totality of what we are putting across has actually inundated our country with the wave of illicit arms, and this do not exclude the lack of governance at the grassroots in most parts of our country. Governance at grassroots is near zero in all intents and purposes. Most of the local governments you go, local government administrator stays in their state capital. Villagers do not have any feeling of government presence. And beside that, we do things that tends to negate unanimity of cohesion, which in a way tend to exacerbate the need for persons and entities to look for succor in arms as a kind of protectionism. So the gamut of all these issues have really put us in a very, very, very serious situation with respect to arms flow and with respect to arms control, especially small arms. So we need to do more than we are doing. We need to reboot our relationship with others, particularly our strategic neighbors. We need to have an inclusive governance platform in our country. We need to reinforce our border control posts and make the border guards to actually have the capacity to do the needful to safeguard the country. And beside that, we must embark on internal policy that tends to reduce attrition.
Thank you very much for your opening remarks. Indeed, a lot has been said. But let me get back here in the studio. Dr. Oje, I don't know how much you agree with AIG Abutu Yaro, but what's your experience from your time at Prescom?
Thank you very much. I think that if we take a holistic look at arms proliferation in Nigeria, the consequences and all of that, the big question is, how did we get here? And that question of how did we get here will lead us to the root causes. Why do people take up arms? Anytime I have an opportunity of discussing this kind of problem, I look at it from the demand and supply side. We're looking at the demand side. Who needs these arms and why? Whether it's government agencies or whether it's non-state actors, why do they need these arms? That's a critical question to answer if you really want to tackle the problem. Now, we'll now look at the supply side. Who supplies these weapons? How does it come into the country and why? Let me go back to demand factor. The demand factor is such that people need these arms. Like the AIG said, to protect themselves, people who feel that government agencies are not protecting them enough, or government agencies are not doing enough to protect them, they seek for self-help. In doing that, they resort to small arms and light weapons. And then there are criminal elements in our midst who want to use these arms to perpetuate whatever activities they're doing. My former boss used to say something. If these people that kidnap and do all sorts of things like oil pipeline vandalization and all that, if without the arms they have, we can confront them on the streets and beat the hell out of them. But once they have these arms, it emboldens them to do
There's a fear factor.
Yes, the fear factor to do whatever they want to do. So they acquire this weapon, the demand side, to be able to perpetuate their evil acts, kidnapping, criminal activities, oil pipeline vandalization, making, some politicians will tell you, I'll make governance unbearable for you. And you see, how do they achieve that? Because they have access to importing small arms and light weapons. These weapons we were talking about in Port Harcourt the other day, was not ordered by government. It was individuals who imported them into the country. Why? So these are the reasons why we have small arms proliferation. Some people need it for their nefarious activities. Cross-border criminality, globalization of criminality, like he said. Now, when people want to import drug dealers, human traffickers, all of these give rise to acquisition of illicit small arms and light weapons. And then we come to the supply side. Who brings in this weapon and why? Now you look at the critical aspect of unmanned borders. Our borders are porous, yes, we know. But people are taking advantage of it. It's not necessarily about the border being open. It's about people who have ulterior motives, who want to bring in these weapons. They will always find a way to bring it in. The last one we're talking about came in as part of furniture and part of equipment. Some people bring it as part of spare parts. So it's not really about our open borders. It's about the need. Who needs it and who is bringing it in?
But are you then saying that the criminals will always be smarter than security agencies?
They're always
because the idea is if you are looking for ways to bring it in, then the security agencies should find a way to outsmart you.
Yes, but these guys think ahead. These guys think ahead. There's no doubt that they think ahead. There's no doubt that they always want to remain ahead of these security agencies because they know that our security agencies, some of our institutions are very weak. Like the IAG said, like he was saying about 1,400 border posts. But from my own perspective as former Presscom programs manager, we know that we have over 1,500 kilometers open borders in northern Nigeria alone. And like we used to say, if all our security agencies are holding their hands together, they cannot cover the space we call Nigeria. So you see that we have deficiency in numbers, we have deficiency in capacity and all that. So that is what these criminal elements are taking advantage of. And you cannot take it away from criminal elements all over the world. They always try to stay ahead of security agents. Otherwise, they can perpetuate their acts.
So what you're saying now, right now, is that most times our security agency are just reactive instead of being proactive.
Definitely, they're always reactive. And then I tell you something. I overheard you talking about leakages from our armories.
Yeah,
it's a prominent factor that the government need to tackle urgently, because contending with the ones that are coming in illicitly is dangerous enough, and then we see people having leakages from the one stockpile that is in government custody. This is a very dangerous trend. And then I want to also say that for us to be able to tackle the challenges of small arms and light weapons, there is something critical that government must do, and that is to address some of the root causes, from unemployment to youth restiveness to religious extremism to ethnic imbalances to perceived and maybe real, in some instances, marginalization, and things that people complain about generally.
Okay.
These are things that if you need to tackle the issue of small arms and light weapons, you must tackle it. And then the issues of electoral system and our system of government, how we elect people into offices. When a politician can open up his mouth boldly to say, I will make this state ungovernable for you, it's either I win or they lose. That's the philosophy they have. Either I win or they lose. So when they begin to have that kind of mindset, and of course they know that the system is not strong enough to persecute them, like we are talking of 20,000 naira fine. And let me also tell you that that Firearm Act is very, very old. That it was made in 1959. What we have today is the Nigerian Firearm Act of 1959.
So there's need for a review.
There's need for a review.
Okay. All right, thank you, Dr. Oji, for your opening remarks. Let's go to Jos now, where we have Major Gabriel. And Major Gabriel, I'm sure that you have listened to the opening remarks of other two guests. We want to have your opening remarks as well. What exactly is the challenge here? Is this a crisis of failure of enforcement, or are there deeper systematic issues at play?
Very much. Having listened to your background narrative on the proliferation of small arms and the need for counter action on them, and then the remarks by your guests in the studio, certain very fundamental facts come to play and have to be understood. In the arms industry, there are what we call the 3 P's and a D phenomenon. The 3 P's are the push from the world, the external world, the global push of small arms, and then the pull, the desire from the inside. That's where you talk about people who want to make business out of it, people who need it in order for their personal economic gains. And then you have the D for the distribution, the push, the pull, the production, and the distribution. Now, the production internationally, particularly for the third world countries, we are building our economies on a hop, step, and jump, no longer on a crawling basis. And the technological development globally, when brought to the micro-national scenery, you will find that there is always a positive side and a negative side. The distribution bit of it is what makes it begin to become attractive for people to carry arms and ammunitions, which, if you listen carefully to the various speakers, they have touched on each of these. But the truth of the matter is, when we understand this role play, every effort now will be geared towards plugging each of them. The developed countries are excited, developed and semi-developed countries. They see us, particularly the African the West African subcontinent. They see us as a fertile ground for the marketing of their products. Small arms business is a good business, in quotes. From the recent statistics I saw, there is a global over $1.3 trillion business in small arms. And they pinned, or what you call the highlighted markets for it includes West Africa. And today in West Africa, Nigeria is a major ground for selling those arms. Therefore, these people will do everything to bring in their arms into Nigeria. Now, for the pull effect, the pull effect due to the weak institutions in terms of governance, framework, and postures that we have in Nigeria, in terms of the socio-economic dynamisms we have in Nigeria. When you talk about employment, you talk about security, you talk about fairness, justice, peace, and all that. That pool makes it attractive for people to want to carry arms. Then you talk about the production, like I did mention earlier on. In Nigeria today, if you don't import small arms and firearms, and ammunition from anywhere, we are beginning to see unofficial production that even compete favorably in terms of quality with those imported. And then, of course, you talk about the distribution. What control measures do we have for people to arm and be armed? One drive is the reality that people are becoming more and more insecure. And when you become more and more insecure, two things will happen to you. Either you look to somebody to support you, or you equip yourself to support yourself. That's where you talk about this concept of self-defense and everyone desiring to survive. So when you look at that aspect of it in the distribution, which is now becoming attractive, and when you put all these three, particularly the two P's, and that is the pool and the production, you put it with the distribution, what do you have in the Nigerian situation? There is now a reigning social psychology that is developing every day in the minds of the average Nigerian. Nobody is scared of weapons anymore. Nobody is, in fact, people are getting more trained, I put it in quotes, more trained every day in the use of lethal weapons. And what is the spirit that goes with weapon handling? If not controlled, if not trained, if not organized, if not adequately kept in perspective, there is this spirit that goes with it. The moment you have a weapon, you think you are in charge of the world. You think you are in control of all that exists. And when you put this together, you find that what we have in Nigeria today is a mixed pot of these elements. What do we need to do? We need to, first, I want to say this and say it loud and clear. We need to bring back confidence of governance into the hearts of the people. And how do you bring back confidence of governance? That government is alive, that government can protect you, that government responds to you, that government is available to save you the stress of looking for weapons. If we do this, I believe sanity will return again. And the issue of controlling the proliferation, that is the everybody having, the everybody needing, and the everybody using of small arms will be reduced to the barest minimum. It can never be totally eliminated, but it will be reduced to the barest minimum. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Major Adofiku, for your intervention. Let me get back to Lokoja, where we have AIG Abutu Yaro retired. AIG Abutu Yaro, I know that we've talked about porous borders, we've talked about unmanned borders, which, again, in recent times, the Nigeria Immigration Service is installing e-borders, which is supposed to give an insight into what happens at the border, even if they are not manned, that from the command and control center here in Abuja, you can see what happens along the borders. And so that leads me to asking, how much of this challenge is corruption? Corruption on the part of those who ought to ensure that the borders are tightened, or who ought to ensure that things are not smuggled in through the borders, and how much of failure of intelligence is it?
Excuse me. Thank you very much. While I do not see the perspective differently, it is my submission that apart from the point you've made, the fundamental gap in these enforcement and procedural errors, which you pointed out, I think the fundamental still goes back to the defective and obsolete legislation with respect to arms control as we have in our country. And I want to use this forum to remind our National Assembly to review and revisit the Firearms Act in Nigeria. Considering the exigencies of the moment and the absolute danger we face as a result of issues relating to illicit arms, it is my submission that a consideration of effecting legislative change to make bearing arms by non-state actors, particularly lethal weapons, to be an aggravated felony with all the conditions that make it impossible for them to get out of adjudication and consideration. If the legislation is not effected, most of the efforts we tend to put in place for now will not yield the desired impact. The criminal elements who do arms trading, arms purchasing, and arms use, they are aware of this legislative defect. However, if a consideration is given whereby Persons in possession of lethal weapons like AK-47 or of higher grade on conviction to amount to death penalty or something similar, or life imprisonment with little or no option, fine, and things like that. Certainly, the trade will have a drastic reduction. In addition to the corruption you talk about, certainly arms business all over the world is deeply immersed in corruption, both in the developed world and in the developing world, to the extent that arms manufacturers in some countries even influence the emergence of government of the day. They contribute to political engineering in order to have favorable policy that tends to protect their illicit trade. We are aware. Besides the corruption we talk about, what are we really doing to ourselves in our country that tends to make the use of weapons an attractive enterprise? We need to do soul searching as a country. Why is it that persons who goes about with weapons do not get the severest sanction by our legislation or by our state apparatus? That itself is an institutional or national concern that we need to redress. Once it's done in that way, the issue of corruption influence with respect to the arms enterprise will become easier to manage. In addition to the aforesaid, it is important for us to take further deeper review of what we call armory in our country. In our services, we need to do a holistic, or we as a government or as a people, need to do a holistic review of creating enabling environment for arms storage. Most of the places you call armory or our public armories, when you go there, most things you see there do not fall within the international best practices of arms storage, arms accountability, etc. We need to invest in building standard armories, meaning standard public armory. That is to say, for where we keep weapons belonging to state actors. Most often, we keep armories in places that is akin to grain storage facilities. When you add it up, you discover that situations exist that makes improper access to this facility or unlawful access to these facilities to become very, very, very possible or very, very easy. So building armories in standard form within the best industry practice as we know it is still apt. That is why the point I'm making is that we as a country, we need to do deeper introspection in terms of how we are managing these affairs, because these affairs of arms and ammunition are very central to our individual safety and collective safety. In addition, apart from the corruption with respect to what we have said, the people we put at the boundaries or at our borders to do border guard work for us, have we really, as countrymen, taken a deeper look at the operating environment? Considering how we provided for them to be there, has it a commensurate relationship with this our expected excellent performance in checking inflow of arms? We must be honest to ourselves as fellow compatriots to do the needful. At our border posts, both customs, both immigration, both intelligence services, et al. Who are there, a good number of them, they practically stay under trees to do border guard for us. A good number of them, they stay under in their vehicles to do border guard for us. But in the normal climb for border guard, is that the environmental condition that we should put them? Then how do we expect efficiency of service with respect to the utility of materials we have made available to them? We need to do further introspection. It is not enough for us to come up and be doing security analysis in the way we are doing. It is important to have a linkage with persons and entities who have a duty to perform in respect of actualizing some of these issues under conversation. We have discussed this matter several times. Sometimes last year, in the same NTA studio, we took a holistic approach to this examination of illicit inflow of arms and ammunition in our country. Between then and now, if we drew some kind of introspection, have we even seen any value addition to the procedures and practices with respect to this subject matter, as we earlier analyzed? It speaks volume about our level of seriousness as a country. And we need to relate what we're saying with policy action so that Nigeria can get it better. It is not easy to say, or it can always be easy to say, that operators at the border are corrupt. Good. But when you go and see what assignment we gave them to do and what we provided them to work with at the border, can we justifiably say that they are really corrupt? You see, this argument is too long. It's just like the theory of the egg and the hen, which one comes first. But we need to do more as a country to get our system going. We as a government, we owe a duty to control arms. Arms control legitimately fall within the purview of governmental action. And we need to examine ourselves. Have we really done the needful in terms of efficiency? Governmental action starts from legislative action. And we don't make the legislative action to be very stiff with respect to importation, possession, and use of lethal weapons. I think all other issues in conversation will become academic, in my view. Thank you.
Very much, AIG Abutu retired, for your contribution there. We need to do more. We need to reinforce our border posts, just like he said, and also revisit the obsolete, legislation, just like you said, the defective and the obsolete legislation, governing all these issues. Another major issue actually has been what he raised is about reinforcing the capacity of our security at the border posts, like that of the customs and the Nigerian police. I want you to speak on that, and also how can we also collaborate, with neighboring countries and other, international organizations to prevent this cross-border movement of small arms and light weapons, which has been alluded to, because they come in through all these porous borders.
Yes, the issue of border management is very critical to curbing the influx of weapons into Nigeria. I know that we have about 21 border communities in Nigeria, and I have been to about 19 of them, so I understand what he's saying. There are places where you see only a single rope separating Nigeria from the other country. In places like Kaoje in Kebbi, you get to a certain point where it's just a river separating Nigeria from Benin Republic on that side, and you come further to Sokoto and all that, you see the Ilela border axis and all that. Some borders actually have good facilities, and then you go to other borders, majority of the borders don't have facilities at all. Like I say, you will even marvel. It's just a single rope. The immigration man is holding a rope at a place that is supposed to be border for Nigeria, bordering Nigeria and another country. So you can imagine what happens in the dark in those kind of areas. And just like we were saying earlier, these criminal elements understand the psychology. They understand these routes more than you and I do. So they know the areas through which they can enter the country. So border management is very critical. And I think that our security agencies need more and more training, more and more capacity development and capacity building on areas of border management. There are I heard you mention about the CG of immigration talking about border management, yep, and all that. Now, the problem with us, we learn to copy, but we don't learn to implement properly. Somebody sees it as, let's get these things done, and then we invite it. Is it working? Is it working? Do we have those facilities? Are they working? Is there really somebody who is in command and control room in headquarters there who is actually monitoring what is happening over there.
No, there are, in fact, there is a complete complex
Yes.
of commander, that much I know,
Okay.
which the president inaugurated just late last year. And not only one person, it's a team of hundreds of people in there
Okay.
who monitor.
Then I'll ask you one question. The CCTV cameras that are supposed to be working in Abuja, what is happening to them? There were CCTV cameras mounted here, right here, in the capital of
Did
the
they ever
Republic
take
of
off?
Nigeria. Are they really working?
Did they ever take off? They were never completed.
So you and I are saying the same thing.
They were never
so,
completed.
You know, let's watch and see. I don't know when they install these things, but let's watch and see how it will progress. Whether they will really, at the end of the day, ensure that these things are working. Like we said, we have over 1,500 kilometers of borders that are open in the northern Nigeria alone. So I am not indicting the security agencies. There's something I want to say about security agencies. I was in a meeting at a place, and the former NIA boss said, security agencies in Nigeria are like goalkeepers. You can stop 100 shots, but the only one you let in could be the decider for the match. So it doesn't matter how, you have to be on top of your game always, which is why I agree we must continue to train our officers and men. And more importantly, those border posts that are porous, we need to put facilities there. I remember there was a time we provided mobile shelter at some of the border facilities. I think government should go a step further, provide more facilities at those border communities. And then we're talking of lack of government presence in some locations. Let me tell you something. Excuse me. Those communities that we see as border communities also have a role to play. If these people don't feel the presence of government, these other people will give them incentives to make those places a launching pad for them. I'll give you an example. The Trans-Sahara route that goes all the way from Mauritania down to Chad through Kano State. If those areas are not manned, these things will continue to flow because these criminal elements understand these routes. They know these routes more than you and I. So, agreed that government agencies must be trained. We must improve on capacity. We must improve on welfare. We must improve on welfare. And then let's look at our collaboration with our neighbors. The major language problem we have is language. All our neighbors speak French. It's only Nigeria that speaks English. If you go to the side of Benin Republic, they speak French. You go to the Cameroon side, some of them speak French. Of course, there's the side that speak English. You go to the side of Chad, they speak French. And then you go to the side of Niger Republic, they speak French. So, if you have to have collaboration with them, you have to have some officers who can communicate with them in that language. Or, I don't know how you can always have an interpreter with you at all times to be able to communicate with these people. I know for certain, Nigeria has done a lot to broaden their relationship with this, including buying vehicles for them, including buying equipment. I know there was a time Nigeria gave up to 50 Hilux Jeeps to the border patrol in Niger Republic, just to make sure that we have collaboration with them. Now, if you're collaborating with somebody and you don't speak the language with the person, it makes it a little difficult for collaboration, even though we know that security has a certain language that is not really a written language that everybody can
Understand.
rely on. But we know clearly that communication is key. We need to begin to train our people. Since we have all French people surrounding us, our people should have basic knowledge of that language so that cooperation can be easy. Another thing is that our laws and the laws of those francophone areas, francophone countries, are not necessarily the same. So it makes it a little difficult for collaboration. But I think that is something that should be deepened. There is the Nigeria-Cameroon border management, something that's ongoing. I think Nigeria should strengthen that. I think also Nigeria should strengthen our relationship with Benin Republic, with Niger Republic. I know for certain, for instance, those who smuggle vehicles, you'll be surprised that vehicles come more from Kebbi, come more from Sokoto than they come in from our border in Benin Republic and our border on the other side, which are official normal borders. But you'll be surprised and shocked that we have more vehicles coming in from those areas. And again, human trafficking. These are the routes they also use. Human traffickers, these are also the routes they use. So it's not only about small arms and light weapons coming into the country. And mind you, these criminals have strategies and methods of importing weapons into the country. You can see them bringing in cattle, but under the truck of that cattle, they have already laid arms inside. And you see some of them crossing as headers. Somebody can bribe them to put weapons as part of the luggages they are coming in with. And that is why we need to checkmate not only those who are coming in as businessmen or as big business ventures, but also those who are trickling in. You know, in those borders, there are people who speak the same language. In Badagry axis, those are people on that side speak Yoruba language. Those like they are brothers and sisters on the other side, actually. These artificial borders separated them. And you see that, just like I said, criminal elements understand this psychology. They come to those communities and still use people from those communities to do their dirty deals. So we need to critically open up our eyes. I like the idea of the border and all that, but we must ensure that these things are implemented properly and comprehensively. It's not about having skeletal 1, 2, 3 here and we think it's done. No, because the criminal elements will leave that side you have protected and use another side that is open.
Even vandalism, there have been reports of vandalizing.
Pipeline vandalism, all that. But you know, because we're talking specifically about arms, that I'm trying
No,
to
I mean
keep the
vandalism of even equipment at the borders.
Yes, completely. If we don't have capacity there in those areas, no matter what you put in there, they will always find a way to vandalize it. They will always find a way to circumvent normal routes and go through illicit routes to bring in still their illicit trade, perpetuate their illicit trade. So I think that another thing that Nigerian government can do in order to ensure that these weapons doesn't fly into our country is to ensure that there is government presence in those border communities, because these people are susceptible to being used without even their knowing it.
Okay. All right, let's head back to Jos, where we have Major Adofiku. Major Adofiku, I'm sure you've listened keenly to all that Dr. Oji has had to say, and I'm just wondering, you know, while I'm not sure how much of a barrier the language difference is, the Anglophone, Francophone thing, how much of a challenge is the departure of some of these neighbors from the ECOWAS fold recently?
First of all, let me restate this. All Dr. Oji has said, and even the retired AIG has said, they square into the symptoms of our situation. The fundamental reality is, if the strong demand is not there, the arms business would no longer be attractive. If the strong need for the use of the arms, which is what we economically, you said, the demand, if it's not there, if it is weakened, nobody will want to go into a business investing so much of his resources and not getting the desired market for it. Therefore, on that point, I want to plead that what we need to do is work hard on changing the attitude, the general attitude of Nigerians. Let us begin to own Nigerians as individuals, so that when people come to sell these products for you or to you, they don't get the market they need. On the other hand, for your question on the issues concerning Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger Republic getting out of ECOWAS, it is a sad and unfortunate development. It is a development that theoretically establishes a further favorable ground for this business we are discussing today, proliferation of arms and ammunitions. Why is it so? The collaboration that we needed, the border collaborations that we needed, the demographic control system we used to enjoy under the canopy of ECOWAS is it's just like you jumping from an aircraft with your parachute and the parachute is perforated. Is being quickly eroded. And the direction is very obvious. Nigeria should take the development of this movement of these three states out of ECOWAS, beyond the international diplomatic table discussion and analysis. We should take it very personal to us. It touches our survival. I'll give you a very quick illustration. There was a community sometime in Kaduna, in southern Kaduna, that we discovered was filled with people from Burkina Faso and Mali doing some quick, small artisanal mining. Under the ECOWAS treaty and arrangements, it was not difficult for us to shovel them out of the country and get them back to their country and get our communities restored there. Today, with this break-off now, would we have that easy diplomatic relationship with such countries that, of course, as you know and I know now, are drifting in a new direction? And that direction, everybody, the Western world, and even us, in the remaining ECOWAS, we are getting a little bit, uncomfortable with. Therefore, I want to say it in a simple sentence. The ECOWAS situation is something that must not just be left to government, but every thinking Nigerian should begin to work up his mind. What did we get wrong in ECOWAS that sent these guys away? What can we do quickly that will bring them back to the force? There are what you call economic attractions that are used in taking them away. Some of those attractions used to bring them together, to us in Nigeria in particular. Our economic strength then, our resources, disposition then. These we need to sit back and look again and work quickly on them, strengthen ourselves, and begin to see ways we can. Look, the joy of it is that these guys are not just another country. They are biologically related to us as black Africans. These guys are not just, abstract nations. They are nations that have long-standing relationship with us. We must build back on it, reinstate those weak areas, and get back these countries to the African fold, to the West African fold, and begin to relate effectively with them. Again, finally, concerning this issue of proliferation of light arms, I beg you, and I want to plead with all Nigerians, and indeed with government, while we work to strengthen our control institutions, let us begin a hard work on changing the attitude of our people. Like I did say, proliferation of arms itself is not criminal, it's not dangerous, but the attitude that flows with the use of those arms and ammunition, that is what makes it dangerous. That is what brings out the kind of elements we are talking about, the criminal elements that we want to use it to their advantage. That is what the stress is on. We need to, as we strengthen our institutions. I just came out of a crisis area some 24 hours ago, where there was an attack on a community, and that community is just about 11 kilometers away from the urban setting with a good road, but 6 hours after that, the invited security agencies had not arrived. What does that signal does that send to the people? Despondency. They now feel government is not interested in us. But when I went back to check on the security agencies, why didn't you get there? They said the only vehicle we have was not serviceable. They said we needed to commandeer people's vehicles. Who was going to volunteer to give them vehicles to go and use on a combat area? These are some of the realities we need to come back on, in addition to the issue of reviewing our legislation. But let me say this. I take back from the history of this country, during the military regime, armed robbery became such a threat that we said, let us give the maximum counter-treatment to it. If you are caught in armed robbery, you are executed. We even take you to your community to execute them. Did it reduce armed robbery? No. Even as legislations are being forged, I'm not saying it's wrong, even as they are being modified and improved upon, the attitude, the spirit that goes, and indeed the internal governing system and structure has to be reviewed to give back the confidence to the people that government is in control, people can be protected, people's lives and properties can be safe. In addition to these, all that we've been narrating as, means of solving the problem. It is more complex than just counting statistics on available weapons. It goes with what use, who uses it, how does he use it. What else can you say? The policemen that are supposed to safeguard your lives and property, keep the instrument for safeguarding your lives and property, are the ones through which there is a major leakage in the holding of those equipment. It's a dangerous issue that is not a studio matter that we can conclude. But I must say, there is a need for an aggressive ideas change, positive ideas change in this country to help us get out of the mess we are in. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Major Gabriel, for your perspective there. There is need for a positive mindset. We need to reset a mindset. You talked about the 3 P's and the D. That is the push, the pull, the production, and the distribution. When we come back, we'll examine the role of Nigerians, especially the communities around the borders, the role that they need to play in checkmating or tackling this challenge. Stay with us.
They asked me how I came this far. I told them I had to sweat. Sweat is chasing your dreams. Sweat is never giving up. Sweat is action, but can also bring germs. That's why I use Dettol Cool Soap with 5 degrees cooling sensation. Summer heat brings body odor, but Dettol Cool protects you from 99.9% of illness-causing germs and keeps you fresh.
The business environment, to be honest with you, has been extremely hard on most Nigerian women's businesses, and of course harsh for a number of reasons. There is no way you would increase or move subsidy and increase the price of fuel that it doesn't have the counter effect. It has been very challenging for so many women. I know that a lot of them have cried in one way or the other to us to find ways of intervening. But that is not to say that it is all doom and gloom. We will still have a few percentage of women that are thriving in this economy, but we hope that we'll be able to get a larger percentage. One of the things I've seen with even our local purchases now is that people are buying more made in Nigerian options of food, of clothing, and so on and so forth than the imported. So that again is helping some of our industries thrive. Surprisingly, the telecommunications is still doing well, and the reason is very simple. A lot of people are going for online options of skills in terms of training, communications, even remote working. And so you will see that people that provide services around those areas also thrive. But I think at the end of the day, it's about partnerships, collaboration, and influencing power from especially the private sector and even the public sector. But we really need the public sector to drive a number of things, especially policies, because the public sector has the national spread above even whatever we can do in our own small way. What has happened over the years is that even the government, for example, is being pulled from different angles by all these stakeholders. We need to harness ourselves to have strategic focus areas, and we should all be moving in the same direction, not using a competitive approach, but a collaborative approach. Secondly, in collaboration, we need to move with large clusters of decision makers. Instead of, the process of reaching out to individuals is painstakingly long and it takes time. And so we need to engage these stakeholders on a larger platform. I think it's very important to identify where you can get help in your own little way. And one of the things I've realized is that when you operate in silo, it is difficult for you to lift yourself out of the situation. Identify ways you can do what you are doing in a simpler way. And if what you are doing is no more profitable, why not find out what can you do in the meantime that will help you? You need to think outside the box and then connect. What you can do is also identify people and become a cluster to provide a service that ordinarily you cannot do alone.
Welcome to Silver Oasis.
Silver Oasis, a TV series dedicated to aging and older persons in Nigeria. Be part of this series and discover the transformative programs crafted to give a new lease of life to our senior citizens, courtesy of the National Senior Citizen Center.
The National Senior Citizen Center is the oasis for the senior citizens.
For thought-provoking discussions on aging, geriatric social care, and issues that matter most to our senior citizens.
Silver Oasis.
Silver Oasis.
Silver Oasis.
Tune in to Silver Oasis on the network service of the NTA every Saturday at 10:05 p.m. Silver Oasis, improving the quality of lives of senior citizens.
This Sunday, live on Sporty TV. Mallorca versus Las Palmas. Watch live on Sporty TV. Brought to you by SportyBet. Play with champions.
Thanks for staying with us. You're still on to Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And our conversation has been on tackling proliferation of small arms and light weapons in the country. Before we went on break, we were going to go to our Zoom guest, AIG Abutu retired. AIT Abutu, I wanted to respond to some of the issues that was raised by Major Gabriel. He talked about the need for us to make, the need. He talked about that what makes attractive for people to carry arms, and also to bringing back, the confidence of Nigerians in governance, which is actually very, very vital in this fight. How do we get the buy-in of Nigerians, in this fight, especially how can community leaders and civil society organizations be engaged in efforts to combat the proliferation through, creating awareness, the proper awareness?
Thank you very much. I want to align myself in many ways with the flow of conversation so far. However, I want to really point out that in this kind of context we find ourselves, particularly when we are engaging ourselves on a national platform as this, we need to be broad-based in our perceptions and, of course, our method of interrogation of subjects. We need to ask ourselves, among the 3 African most populated countries, which of course is Nigeria, followed by Ethiopia and Egypt, both in terms of size and population, we are the 3 leading countries. What makes arms flow into our own country to be more attractive than our other big African country like Ethiopia or Egypt. It requires wider and deeper introspection. That is one point. I take exception to the perspective of the last speaker from Jos, who was specifically referring to some lapses in terms of armed security to the police. This is not police issue or police omission. It is a national malady. If we begin to isolate illicit arms or arms mismanagement on service by service perspective, it does not add up to this conversation. The details of how this thing happened with respect to individuals, entities, and services, it can be a very gory story for national audience. My perspective is that we have taken consideration of this issue as a national malady that requires a holistic, nationalistic, and precise approach. We need to relate with others. African big countries I've mentioned, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Nigeria in terms of population. What is it that they do in their own country that has reduced the appetite of their citizens for small arms? We need further interrogation and further studies in this respect. We should actually examine the intricacies of our internal relationship, governmentally, communally, and generally. What are the triggers that has made sales use of small arms to become very, very lucrative in our country? We must isolate that cause and look at it from a holistic perspective and neutralize it. Because if there's no reason for people who will bear arms, certainly they will not be buying weapons for fancy. I agree. There are some communal use of weapons, local weapons, like during burials, during Durbar, traditional and customary ceremony. That is outside the purview of the national threat to security we are talking about. We are talking about this kind of automatic weapons that has criminal implication in use and that has security implication in use. So my perspective is that we need to ask ourselves, maybe at a governmental level or at another forum, and do deeper policy analysis. What makes weapons to be attractive in our country? If that aspect is not isolated and treated, we may continue this conversation ad infinitum. 7 months ago, we were in NTA studio, Abuja, over this same matter. Between then and now, we expected some of the inputs made to be dilated and effectuated at the policy implementation level. These are the steps required of us and our country for us to have a kind of semblance of sanity to a raging problem. In addition, somebody said there was a time that armed robbery was punishable with death, that did not reduce it. To me, those kind of statements at a national discourse like this calls for introspection. You cannot really say the impact of a government or security action, except, of course, you back up with data, bringing into focus how within the period of maybe 10 years or 5 years of making armed robbery to be punishable with death and the preponderance of that kind of criminality, in absence of that data, it will be very, very inappropriate.
Connection to AIJ Abutu Yaro, but enough said. he's made quite a number of points. And now talking about the laws governing firearms in Nigeria that are obsolete. I know that the National Assembly is currently reviewing, obsolete legislations in Nigeria. Now, whose duty is it to see that if this is not captured in what the National Assembly is doing, that they actually, have a looking at it and somebody to draw attention to it? And second, Nigeria does not ban outright the ownership of guns. Is this gray area, could it be part of the issues?
Now, I want to say that, first and foremost, whose responsibility is it to raise this issue of the Obsolete Firearm Act for review? The National Assembly, in their wisdom, should know that it is time to review that document. But I am also aware that the National Center on Small Arms is doing something about that.
Okay.
I think that they have started a process of reviewing the 1959 Nigerian Firearm Act, which I am sure they are going to send to the appropriate quarters and then send to the National Assembly. And I hope that they speed up that process so it will help the National Assembly in whatever they are doing about constitutional reviews presently to ensure that that very critical component is included in whatever review that is going on at the National Assembly. Because if we don't get it right now, let me also say that Nigeria has domesticated the ECOWAS Convention on Small Arms and Light Weapons, but has not domesticated, even though Nigeria has signed and ratified the Arms Trade Treaty. The Arms Trade Treaty is another very important document that Nigeria should ensure that we domesticate, because it's whatever was done as part of the ECOWAS Convention, and that document also tarries, including the United Nations Programme of Action, as well as the ITI, the International Tracing Instrument, and all that. Now, if we put all those documents in perspective, I think that the National Center should also take cognizance of these documents in their review for the final submission they are going to make to the appropriate quarters. And then the second part of your question, I believe that Nigeria has to get it right if we must reduce to the barest minimum the incidence of small arms and light weapons proliferation in this country. But we need to do certain fundamental things. We need to take certain very fundamental steps. When I emphasize these fundamental things, I mean that consciously, national orientation, the psyche of the people, understanding that it is not your responsibility to carry weapons. It is somebody else's responsibility to try to protect you. Even if it's not doing enough, you have a responsibility to support that person to succeed. Why do I say that? People carrying up arms to try to protect themselves is counterproductive. Security agencies have the right to do that. If you keep a gun in your house, the gun may outlive you. You don't know who will inherit it and what the person is going to do with that gun. If you leave a gun in your house, a criminal coming to your house knowing that you have a gun, he will come in firing because he knows you have one. But if he knows that you don't have, he will come to harass you with the weapon and cut away whatever he wants to cut away.
What if he doesn't know that you have?
If he does, that's the element of surprise. That's the element of surprise, quite frankly. But you remember the case of somebody who shot at criminals from his window, and they said, "We are coming back for you." Because he felt, the problem with having gun is that it takes away the chances of dialogue. When you feel you have a gun, you feel that you are empowered. You feel you can do a lot. And then the guy fired at criminals in Port Harcourt from the windows of his bedroom, trying to shoot one of them. And they just look and say, "Okay, we're coming back." And indeed they came back for him. And we all know how that story ended. So we need to educate our people. It is not safe for you to have weapons in your house. One, for the reason that it outlives their owners. Two, for the reason that it can be counterproductive. And let me also say that.
But there is a law that allows for Nigerians to have arms.
Now,
but the challenge from our report is that there is no proper documentation.
No, I don't think it's about documentation. It's about the categories of weapon. Like he said, there are hunting rifles, rifles for sport. That is allowed. But there's no how you can allow an individual to hold an assault rifle. An assault rifle is for war. It's dangerous. It's for outright confrontation with criminals. So when you're talking about hunting rifles, you're talking like he's talking of ceremonies that people use pump action to do and all that. That can be licensed, but nobody is supposed to be licensed. In fact, Nigeria Constitution doesn't allow anybody to hold assault rifles. And let me also say something. I think there's a misconception about weapons generally in West Africa. Under the ECOWAS Convention, there's a blanket ban on importing weapons into West Africa by anybody at all, including governments, including states. However, if you're a state government and you have genuine need of security to import weapons, then you request for an exemption certificate from ECOWAS. Under that exemption certificate, you're going to list everything that you're going to import, where you're bringing it from, the specifications and all that. And then it is transmitted to member states for 60 days. If after 60 days there's no objection, then you are now issued the exemption certificate. It is that exemption certificate that will now enable you to import weapons into your country. So you see, it's not something that a private individual can easily do. So when you request for license from the IGP to import, to buy a firearm, they must consider the category of firearm you're requesting. And nobody will ever give an individual an assault rifle. And that is the problem I also have with retired officers who keep those such weapons in their possession after retirement. It becomes a security threat to both the individual and the society at large. And you mentioned the issue of those border communities. Now, I want to repeat that those people must feel the presence of governance and government if you don't want criminal elements to use them as a platform for their illicit trade. I'll give you a few examples. I think it was 3 years ago, the Nigerian customs went after somebody that brought in weapons, and the guy took to his sales with his car. Customs pursued him to a community. The community fought the customs to protect that person. It was in the news. It was all over. The community fought customs to leave that man because the man was a benefactor to the community. You know, so you see, we need to make these people feel the impact of governance.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Oji. Thank you very much. Because we're winding up now. Let's call in Major Adifoko to give us, what do you think are the major takeaways from the conversation that we have had this morning that you would advise the policy makers to hold on to?
Thank you very much. First of all, permit me to say here that we must become personal in addressing Nigerian national issues. The urgent desire to build that nationalism rather than just analytical, prescriptive, dispositions would not help the nation. Secondly, I would suggest to government that the National Orientation Agency should be adequately supported to come up with a robust, if not aggressive, address on changing the national spirit of the average Nigerian from what is in it for me to what this nation is to me. And then thirdly, I want to say weapons can only be useful when you are in charge of it. And it is difficult to be in charge of a weapon if you are not trained to know the lethal character of a weapon. This is a message, look, like I did say in my introductory statement, the number of people in Nigeria today that know how to shoot guns has astronomically increased. In one of the quiet security meetings, it was stated that they now run in millions of Nigerians who are non-state users of these weapons. We need to aggressively push forward, not just, yes, the governmental technical aspect of command, control, and all that of weapons should be put in place. But I think what matters most now is restoring the confidence of the people by re-educating them. There is this slogan, if you see something, say something. Fantastic slogan. How would you see something and say something when you are scared that if you say something, you may not be protected? So these are some of the very basic, issues that I keep emphasizing. The heart of the mind is what is most needed in solving the Nigerian arms proliferation situation as it is.
All right. Thank you very much, Major Gabriel Adofiku. I think it's a fine place to leave this conversation, hoping that the issues that have been raised here and solutions preferred will be taken seriously by the authorities that are concerned. Major Gabriel Adofiku joined us from Jos. He's a retired major and MD/CEO of Damex Consultants Limited, a development and security consultant, and one-time Secretary General, Retired Army, Navy and Air Force Officers Association. Thank you very much for your perspectives on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much, sir.
Also thank AIG Abutu Yaro, retired, a fellow of the National War College, and former CP Zamfara State, who joined us via Zoom from Lokoja. Thank you very much, AIG, for your time on the program.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
And finally, but by no means the least, let me thank Dr. Nkemakonam Dixon Oje, the disarmament and arms control expert and programs coordinator of the former Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons, PRESCOM. It's been a pleasure having you on the program. We thank you for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. We'll see you again tomorrow with another very incisive edition of the program. I am Victor Azu.
And I'm Ademola Ade. Do have a great day.